We're here at Game On 2.0 at the Science Center, and we're going to go take a look around and play some of the games that sort of meant something to me growing up in my childhood, because gaming's a big part of my life. Yeah, I remember playing this at like lunch in middle school at people's houses for hours on end, and then not coming back to school on time. Forgot how weird the Nintendo 64 controller actually is compared to stuff that's around today. But it's also interesting that like Mario Kart's exactly the same today as it was. I guess this game came out in '96. Better graphics, but this has like the same power-ups, same everything. So this is probably one of my favorite games of all time. I'd say it had a big influence on my life. It's also probably one of the first franchises to translate from a 2D scape to a 3D scape seamlessly. But it also sort of pioneered control schemes that are still used today, and like 3D platform gaming as well. Well, it's a sort of a Zelda franchise trait, but it makes you jump automatically when you run to like a chasm or a hole in the ground or something, which at the time was completely unheard of in games and sort of revolutionized the platforming control scheme. Graphically though, it really doesn't look like I remember in my mind. I guess your mind sort of plays tricks on you and makes you think that things look better than they actually did back then. I just remember this game being ridiculously difficult. It was one of the first open world games where it kind of let you do whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted. There's still an order of the dungeons that you had to go through and stuff like that, but you also sort of had more freedom than gamers had ever had before in a video game. It was sort of amazing the fact that it wasn't divided into levels like a traditional video game like Super Mario Brothers, for example. It would sort of let you explore on your own, and it was one of the first games to sort of capture that feeling. Yeah, my first experience with Doom was watching my older brothers play the game, and the giant pink monsters that sort of looked like a big piece of bubblegum used to scare the crap out of me. Yeah, I used to have a few nightmares about Doom for sure. Sort of the grandfather of the first-person shooter as well. Like, sort of in a way, it still stands up. I mean, you can only look left and right. You can't look up and down like in modern first-person shooters, but the same concept's still there. You pick up weapons, you run around, you shoot enemies, and yeah. It's definitely probably one of the first racing games, at least, to sort of adopt this perspective. And I can only imagine sort of how mind-blowing it probably was to people back then, because it looks pretty good today. It kind of looks like it's a three-dimensional game, even though it's obviously not. It's all pixels, but it's the perspective sort of that changes things, I guess. It also causes difficulties because it's really difficult to see where you're going. I mean, the arrows help, but they don't really do enough to show you exactly where you need to go. I remember spending countless hours playing the multiplayer of Goldeneye with my friends. Time that probably could have been better spent doing something else, but it was a good time at the time. It's also interesting how certain games are sort of embedded into my memory, and like I totally remember the layouts of the levels and the various things that you have to do in missions. Like, I'm playing through a level called The Dam, and I completely remember absolutely everything you're supposed to do, right down to even enemy locations. I remember you have to kill that guy before he gets to the alarm, or a bunch of enemies show up. And it's not like that with every game. A lot of games I'll play, especially modern games, and then kind of forget about them a few days later. The Halo franchise also sort of revolutionized the way first-person shooters control on consoles with the two joysticks. Still used today by modern first-person shooters like Call of Duty. It was a little hard to catch on to at first because most people were used to using the R button on the Nintendo 64 controller in games like Goldeneye and Perfect Dark. It was a bit of a learning curve to it, but once you got the hang of it, it was way more accurate than past control schemes that were used in earlier first-person shooters. What's interesting about Super Mario Land is it didn't really do anything to sort of change up or revolutionize the platforming genre. It just sort of polished everything that Nintendo did with Super Mario Brothers 3. Graphically today, too, it still looks really good. I guess it's the art style. It's a little more timeless than other games from the 16-bit era, so it's kind of nice to see that it's here. I never played Donkey Kong on an arcade cabinet like this, but I had it for ColecoVision. I think my dad bought it years ago and I sort of inherited it. And I remember playing it as I was probably 10 or 11 and finding it extremely difficult. And I'd say that was pretty accurate because it's still really difficult. I mean, I'm having a problem just getting past the first level. But it's interesting because it was sort of the first time that gamers got to be introduced to two really big Nintendo characters that are still around today, Donkey Kong and Mario. But I believe he was called Jumpman, and then eventually sort of got his own game a few years later in Super Mario Brothers. Stupid barrels every once in a while will go down the ladder and absolutely destroy me. It's definitely extremely difficult.